Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Liverpool Latest. One of my favorite things I love to do here on the channel, especially after a horrific loss like the one we saw against United, is I always like to go back and read the press conference that takes place for Arne Slot, cover the points he makes. But today, I'm adding some additional names to that list because Szoboszlai and Konate also had some things to say, and I would love to hear what some of the excuses or some of the normal jargon that's being thrown around is what's being used today. Here's what I will say. When it comes to Arne Slot, it seems like it's a lot of what I expected, personally speaking. He is quoted as saying that the game wasn't necessary to lose. And it seems as though that early lead was because they, quote, fell into a trap for both of those goals, which frankly they did. It was some horrific defending that took place over the course of that 15-minute period that led to us being down 2-0 for a good portion of the match. What he will say is that the strong performance in the second half gave props to Dominic Szoboszlai and Cody Gakpo for showing resilience. But of course, the game is decided by fine margins. Like Kobe Manu, who scored the late winner, emphasizing that small mistakes can make a big difference. Of course, he's going to complain about the referees too, but we're going to get to that in the next segment. As far as what I can take from this Arne Slot press conference, but without talking about the ref aspect of things, very much a systematic inconsistency that is constantly occurring within the team, especially early on in games. We can't get ourselves out the gate early on. We allow poor defensive performances to continue to happen, and teams, no matter how large or how good or even how bottom of the barrel, take advantage of. And that is something that needs to be fixed in not only towards the end of this season to salvage whatever's left of it, most importantly, to salvage next season and get it off to a good start. But it's certainly an absolute management failure on Slot's part, despite the fact that at one point we did tie the game 2-2, and then of course absolutely bottling it in the very end. But the one thing I want to talk about, though, is Slot's accountability versus the deflection. Of course, he acknowledges that the positives in the sense of him acknowledging anything is that he understands the tactical mistakes that took place, of course, admitting to the opponent's strengths. The negatives of that, again, is the VAR conversation, which is going to take place here in a few minutes after I talk about what Konate said and what Szoboszlai said. Konate is quoted in saying that it's a very big disappointment for them to lose that game. Some quotes from his talk with Liverpool.com, where he said, for sure, it's a big disappointment because I think we concede 2 goals that we must not concede when we start the game. In the second half, we came back with a great mentality to go 2-2. And in the other moments, we can hurt them, but we concede a goal, and that's why it's very sad for us because we didn't start the game very well, but the second half we started very well. I will say this much. Depending on the game and the opponent, Liverpool are very much a second half team. They have not been a first half team for a majority of this season, and if they are to do virtually anything, they do it more so in the second half. And you can honestly say that it was like that towards the end of Klopp's run too. I would notice that I would watch some of the absolute worst first half performances towards the end of Klopp's run, and then they would come back and have an incredibly entertaining second half. The scoring would open. things would happen. And it was an overall, entertaining game, but at the same time, that first half and not being able to get out the gate is what really kills us. So I definitely understand where Konate is coming from specifically, but let's also not be remiss in saying that the reason why we go down 2-0 in the first half is because of mental errors and tactical errors in the defense. And if those tactical and mental errors don't happen, the game doesn't start 2-0 in the first 15 minutes. But that's just my personal opinion. So a lot of people are using Florian Wirtz as a scapegoat for this match, which I wholeheartedly disagree, and I might talk about in a future episode. But I, for one, definitely am scapegoating the defense because it's clear as day that something was not right, and that caused us to be in the situation that we started that game in. Szoboszlai, on the other hand, as far as his overall emotions after the game, he didn't feel very good. He goes on to say that we go home with 0 points, and the first half we shouldn't be happy at all. We should just take from this game the beginning of the second half, I think, because that's when we showed properly who we are. The one thing I wanted to touch on, and this kind of emphasizes my agenda of Szoboszlai being a future Liverpool captain, when he was asked about, showing leadership and taking that role or taking part in that role, especially in moments like being down 2-0 at a halftime, he says, you have to ask the other ones. I try to do my best. I try to, as you say, drag them with me, take them with me, and hopefully set an example day by day, game by game. That's what I want to do, and that's going to be my plan for the last 3 games as well. As far as setting standards go, he says, I think so, but I have a lot of players who can set an example. I try to be one of them, and if it works, I'm happy. So, doesn't give himself a whole lot of credit. Shockingly enough, he's very humble, I feel, in this. It's not so much of a showy response as I would possibly expect. I will say, when it comes to leadership on the team, I believe Szoboszlai has probably been one of the emerging new leaders to come out of this year, just from how well he has played and his mentality when it comes to certain aspects of the game. I believe his answers here are quite humble, personally speaking. He doesn't necessarily put himself over. He says, if I do my job, I try to do my best to do my job. And he goes on to say that you'd have to ask the other ones, but being his teammates, who show leadership potential, or if not leadership quality already, allegedly, because frankly, I don't think there's much leadership on this team at this rate in this season. But all in all, a lot of things to uncover here in this first segment of the video. You could take with it as you will, but the real meat and potatoes comes from the aspect of Arne Slot, in my opinion, taking little to no accountability for himself and his players, and focusing a lot of his blame for what happened in the game on the refereeing. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that Premier League referees are perfect. As a matter of fact, they might be some of the worst referees I have seen in sports. I have seen everything from bad umpires in baseball to horrific hockey referees, and I've seen some bad hockey referees. And I've even gone on to see some horrible decisions in MMA, if we can want to go a complete 180 on that one. But what I will say is that there is a big problem with refereeing in the Premier League personally. There is a pattern of bad decisions that take place. Arne Slot seems to be convinced that those bad decisions is a pattern of going against Liverpool throughout the course of the season. I don't know if I find that to be true all of the time, just because we have gotten calls that maybe we should have not gotten. I think the refereeing for us this year has been more fair than what I'm typically used to seeing, personally. I've seen some bad, recent years, I've seen some bad refereeing decisions against us. I think we've had some pretty decent outcomes out of these refereeing decisions this season. So I can't necessarily sit here and blame referees entirely. I think they've made a lot of mistakes, but I don't think they really made many mistakes this game. Slot himself implies that the key calls in the game contributed to the 3-2 defeat against United, and there is a belief that Liverpool are repeatedly on the wrong side of marginal decisions. I feel like a lot of this has to do with that VAR handball check, which, if you ask me from a personal point of view, and I'm no expert on the game of football, I'm a fan of football like you watching this video, but if I'm watching back those replays, and I talked about this yesterday, if I am watching those replays, and I watched all of those replays, there is no indication whatsoever to me that there is a handball taking place. I have seen more egregious examples of a handball that don't get called in VAR than I did with this particular instance. To me, this is not a handball. I don't see the ball touching the hand or the hand moving from a ball interaction in any way, shape, and form. I can't see it. I don't know if you have to have a really minute sense of sight to see the centimeters and millimeters of movement to indicate that you need a handball, but if the check was taking as long as it was, how could you sit here and tell me that you can justify complaining that the handball took place and that they didn't call it? The check went on for much longer than I think it should have. And I watching sports as long as I have, I've also gone on to, because I work in media and I work in radio, I work with Coastal Carolina here in South Carolina with their sports program in conjunction with the radio station I work at. And I have heard many a times during these broadcasts when Coastal Baseball is having a review done, whether it's them reviewing it or against them. I have heard many a times from Joe Katz, who is the voice of Coastal Baseball, say that if a check is taking this long, what exactly are you trying to look for? I feel like it should be pretty said and done that the call should be what it is, or the call should be reversed or stand or whatever the instance might be. If you're looking that hard or that long to find something to reverse the call, then maybe there's nothing to reverse in the first place. Just my 2 cents. But instead, let's blame the referees for an outcome that clearly was our fault. Let's be honest. We're the ones that went down 2-0. The refs did not do that. We did with our own mental incapacity during the game. All right? So let's blame the players on the field and say they allowed this to happen. Why did they not play the way they should have played in those first 2 goals? Why did they allow that to happen? Instead of, why did the ref cause this call to make this goal happen? No, why did the players put themselves in that position for the goal to happen in the first place? Why didn't they defend better? Why didn't they do what they should be doing, what they get paid millions of dollars a year to do? But instead, let's blame referees for a non-issue, if you ask me. But that's just my 2 cents, frankly. You might find it to be, you might disagree with me on it, and that's fine. But trust me when I tell you, if you watch sports as long as I have, you're going to get bad calls. You're going to have calls that not go your way. Worst of all, you're going to get calls that really go against the actual rule that they're reviewing in the first place. In this case, there were some questionable calls that took place in this United game, but the main ones that people are focusing on, like the VAR check, that was not one of them. Like, a bad foul here and there isn't going to make or break a game, if you ask me. At least not in this particular game that I noticed. If you ask me, it was because the team played like shit. That's why they scored the way they scored. Hell, That's why we scored 2 goals against them, because they had mental errors on their side. And that's how we took advantage. That's how we tied the game. Are we going to blame refs for that too? Is United going to blame refs for that too? No. It seems like Liverpool fans are the only ones that constantly like to blame the refs for their own problems. Just food for thought for future reference. Some other food for thought, and I hate that I have to admit to this, but this is one of the rare times this season I sit here and I say to myself, I agree with Jamie Carragher. Jamie Carragher, for a good portion of this season, has acted like a total clown in regards to covering Liverpool. And in this case, I find it very hard for me to disagree with things that he has been saying about the club. Most importantly, his core concern being the absolute lack of identity this team currently has under Arne Slot, where he's questioning what Liverpool actually are under Slot from a tactical point of view. And frankly, he's not the only one. Because he's a pundit, he has obviously a greater voice out of anybody. And then when you get to the fan base is now questioning, or has been questioning, that for the better part of the last 5-6 months of this season, maybe more so before that. It suggests that the team has certainly drifted away from a clear identity that was built under the likes of Jurgen Klopp. And I'm not here to sit here and say that Klopp's reign was all peaches and cream, but at least the team had a clear and concise identity of what it was trying to be at the time. Arne Slot, to me, and the team that is playing for him, is a lot of good big name players that don't know how to play as a team. And sometimes spending money does not equate teamwork, or does not equal teamwork on the pitch. And I think in this case, we have that issue. Now, granted, there have been other factors outside of this, like injuries that have moved players out of position. But at the same time, I feel like there are times where the starting 11 and the choices made for the starting 11 are clear, blatant tactical errors made by Slot and the coaching staff. So we have to ask ourselves, and I have to ask as a person covering Liverpool football, in the coming season, what exactly is Liverpool going to be? I can't answer that for you right now. But what I can tell you is, if we're going down the trend of a downward spiral that we are having right now, I have no hope for next season. I don't. I do not feasibly see Arne Slot turning this around as it stands with the players he has and the players that he will probably lose after the season is over. I find the future to be incredibly, incredibly cloudy, dark, gray, almost like a thunderstorm, but not the fun kind you sleep through, the one you're scared of as a child. That's what I see on the horizon. Tornado warnings, hurricane force winds, shit like that. I don't see peaches and cream, paradise. I see that one storm from the book, the K? I think it was called. I think it was called The K. That one book where that one kid and this elderly black gentleman are stranded on an island. I read in middle school. I think it was called The K, where they have to fend themselves off from a storm, and the older character passes away. Spoiler alert, sorry. As a result of the injuries he sustained. That is what I foresee. Us being ripped to shreds by a horrific hurricane storm, with the current identity that this team seems to be trending towards. And if you ask me, it is not a Liverpool team I would want to associate with if I was a fan. Granted, I love this team, but I cannot get behind the direction that they are currently going in. I just cannot. Not in any way, shape, and form can I sit here and support what is happening with this team. And there needs to be a change that has to get made. There are videos and topics I have planned throughout the course of the week that will discuss this more in depth. But as it stands right now, it all starts with slot. It starts with slot and it works its way down to the players. And we have to ask ourselves who's really going to stick it out with us for the long run here. Just like how I have to ask myself what the hell is going on with the Liverpool women's team. Seems as though Man City has been doing their fair share of whipping our ass this season, regardless of what gender is playing on the field. Because they lose 1-0 in a WSL match that was decided by a stoppage goal from Rebecca Knack, who plays for City. It's funny because this game, as I just said, was decided in stoppage time, so that means the game was 0-0 the entirety of the way until the last few minutes. And Liverpool, according to some, were the better side early on, with multiple chances with Denise O'Sullivan, Grace Fisk, Aurelie Silag, who tried to get a header in, and it was just the pressing disrupted by City's rhythm, which was significant in the first half. Of course, failure to convert those chances certainly resulted in what was an eventual heartbreaking defeat. Granted, I will say the mentality is a lot better on the women's side than the men's. If it was the men's side facing City, they would have been down at least 2-0 by then in that first half. But and even with all the goalkeeper heroics that were taking place, some decisive errors by Jennifer Falk were made as she mishandled a late set piece situation, which was, of course, the nail in the coffin. So, as it stands right now, the women's team is also struggling. They have a big match coming up, which I believe is the Women's FA Cup, if I'm not mistaken, against Brighton. I believe it's this week, if I'm not mistaken. So, that's a bad loss to take going into a game like that. I think it's the semifinals we're in too, so that's even more of a worrisome sign. I would hate to go into a game like that on a loss, but it is what it is. It seems like the women's team is also suffering from set-piece vulnerability. Granted, I'm not sure if it's nearly as bad as the men's this season, but all in all, it's just an unlucky day to be a Liverpool fan, especially this past Sunday, between losing to United and then City on the women's side. Manchester certainly has our number this season for sure, regardless of what gender is playing on the field. So the men's team should be embarrassed. I 100% say that. The women's team, I don't think many of us expected a whole lot from them to begin with, especially with the way they started the season. So I'm not necessarily too heartbroken with what's going on with them, but I do think it's important to mention because this upcoming game against Brighton is going to be pretty big for the state of what they're going to need to get out of this season. So I can only sit here and hope and support, and in hopes that they turn it around and make some sort of chicken salad out of chicken shit. And knowing that it's British cuisine, they might be throwing in some weird fruits or something in that chicken salad too. So I don't know if I support all of that, but I do support Liverpool Football Club, regardless of the men or the women. So thank you for joining me on today's Liverpool Latest. I appreciate you being here. A lot to talk about, a lot to take in. I would like to hear your thoughts down below if you feel so inclined to comment. Whether you think I'm wrong or whether you agree with me, I am curious to know your thoughts. I am in no way, shape, and form afraid to take criticism on any of these matters. So, of course, most importantly, please hit subscribe, follow the show in the best way you can on your favorite platforms, and most importantly, share it with your fellow Liverpool fan. so that way the channel can grow and we can become your source for daily Liverpool news, rumors, conversation, and more. See you guys on the next one. Know that you never walk alone.